I'm here at the Trout Music Hall with Nick Moss, who is a Chicago blues singer and guitarist. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Now, although you're heavily acclaimed as a lead guitarist, you actually began your career playing bass for very underrated yet exceptionally talented artists such as Jim Dawkins and Buddy Scott. How did you get started playing with them, and what sort of things have you learned from that?
I started playing music when I was a kid. Just, my parents were very musical people. They weren't musicians, but they were just music lovers, and so my parents bought my brother and myself a guitar. My brother's like 3.5 years older than my brother Joe. And so we started out playing when I was probably about 10 years old. My brother was about 13. And he took to it right away pretty quick. And I just went through a succession of instruments. And until one day when I was about 14, he came home with a bass guitar. Because by that time I had decided that I wanted to play guitar because I saw my brother getting so good. And he came home with a bass guitar that he bought at a garage sale and said, "Here, play this if you want to play. Quit touching my guitar." So I started as a bass player and got interested in music like every kid does that plays music. Just hearing music on the radio, hearing music at the house, and my father's youngest brother. He's about 14 years younger than my dad, and he was pretty instrumental in leaning or teaching my brother and myself about the rock music from the 60s and 70s when I grew up. When I was just a little kid, my uncle would come over to the house on Sundays and take my brother and I out, and we'd go riding in my uncle's car. And I can remember as far back as being 5 years old and listening to Traffic's Little Spark of High-Heeled Boys on his 8-track cassette player in a 68 Riviera with key-tops. So, music for me has always been something that has just, it's been inside of me. I've always been able to hear something and it has, it expresses itself to me. I don't know if it expresses itself to other people the same way, but since I was a kid, music has not always been an oral thing. It's been a physical thing too, and I've been able to hear different parts of music.
No, you know what? I think it's unplugged from your head stereo.
Okay. I guess they're going to play some music in the background for the interview. That's awfully nice of them.
Great move.
Let's see, this is what I'm talking about. When I was a kid growing up and listening to the music, you need to check that?
No, it should be fine.
All right. But listening to different kinds of music, I would, get a feeling inside of me besides, hearing it and enjoying the music, And, it surprises me when I hear people that say that music doesn't do anything for them. I'm not a big music lover. I don't listen to a lot of music. So you're missing out on a good part of life right there. Because, music to me is something that always been with me, and it brings me back to different times and different places. So I've always been a music lover, and I've gotten a chance to play the music that I love. And as I grew older and learned more about the music that I was listening to as a kid, and finding out who these guys' influences were, and going back and just retracing the steps backwards, that's how I got into blues, was all the rock stuff we listened to when I was a kid. Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Free, Cream, the Allman Brothers, early ZZ Top, even, like early Aerosmith stuff.
Well, a lot of stuff that drew heavily from the blues.
Exactly, and you just retrace your steps. And turns out that, my mom and dad had a lot of that stuff in their collection. When we started reading, you're probably too young for this, but, there was magazines like Cream magazine and other rock magazines, and when Rolling Stone was actually a good magazine.
Back in the day.
That's right. And, and you'd read interviews, by these guys, and they'd say, Otis Rush and B.B. King and Muddy Waters, and oh wait, my mom's got some of that stuff in her record collection. I got to go listen to this stuff again. And it was kind of like that, you know. We learned from the other guys, and then come to find out that these guys were all influenced by guys that were in my backyard.
So would you say that with your uncle who was exposing you to all these different bands, would you say that, you know, he's sort of indirectly an influence on your music?
Oh yeah, definitely. In fact, my latest CD, the one I just put out called Privileged, is pretty much, you know, like 25, 30 years in the making here, because, I mean, I kind of went backwards. I mean, most of my previous 7, 8, this is number 8, my previous 7 albums have been really traditional Chicago-style blues. And this new album that I'm putting out right now, that just came out, is actually more of my tribute to the early rock bands that I grew up with. And a lot of guys start out playing like more rock stuff and then going to blues, where I listened to rock stuff and that brought me to blues, and I started out playing more blues. So yeah, it kind of went backwards, you know, in my later days, I guess. Now,
in 1993, you joined the legendary blues band, and you were actually persuaded, after doing one album with them, and the album is called Money Talks, to switch from bass to lead guitar. What inspired you to make that leap?
Well, I had always been messing around with the guitar, even though my brother told me not to touch his guitar after he brought me the bass. I still would do it, and then, you know, as I got older and got more comfortable on bass and actually, you know, figured out what I was doing on bass enough to be able to play with guys like the legendary blues band. You know, you can't help but be around great musicians, and you know, we'd be touring and being on festivals with, you know, these unbelievable guys that were like my idols by that time, you know, and I learned who these guys were. So guitar was always a passion of mine, and the guitar player in the band at the time, Willie Phillips, he had some family issues going on, and he had to leave the band, and I told Willie, I said, you know, I'll play guitar if you want me to play guitar. And so then I'm talking about Willie Big Eye Smith, who at that time was the band leader. And Willie said, well, that makes sense, you know, it'd be easier to teach a bass player to play the stuff than teach a guitar player to play the stuff right. So I got the job playing guitar and having to show the bass player, and that came into the band, you know, what to do. So that was my first, you know, professional guitar playing gig. Was he just moved me over a chair, that's all.
I understand that in the legendary blues band you played with Willie Big Eye Smith, who was an alumni of Muddy Waters band.
Yeah, that's correct. Willie was Muddy's drummer for, you know, well over 20 years. And, you know, the legendary blues band was Muddy Waters' band. By the time I got into it, it was pretty much just Willie, and occasionally Pinetop Perkins would come out with us, but it went through many changes. But the original lineup of the legendary blues band was Willie Big Eye Smith, Calvin Fuzz Jones, Pinetop Perkins, Jerry Portnoy, and I believe Louis Myers. And they left Muddy's band in 82 or 81, right before Muddy died, pretty much, and formed the legendary blues band. So it was basically Muddy's band, you know, and then throughout the years they made some changes, but it was always Willie Big Eye Smith on the drums back there, and like I said, occasionally Pinetop would come out with us. In fact, my current piano player that plays with us now, Billy O'Shawney, took Pinetop Perkins' place in the band. Yeah, he's on like at least 2 or 3 of the legendary blues band albums. I can't recall the titles, but Willie, yeah, he took Pinetop's place in legendary blues band, and then he moved on to Jimmy Rogers' band. I kind of followed him, and I was a generation behind him because he's an old man and I'm still young. Right, Willie?
Now, after leaving legendary